There's a lot of different ways to use video in the recruiting process. You can do video voicemail, video job ads, video career webinars, and even video interviewing. Video recruiting strategies can bring a lot of change to an organization. And as anybody knows, with a lot of change, there typically comes a lot of chaos. There's a lot of recruiters and talent acquisition leaders out there that are wondering, how the heck should I even get started? And how should they avoid the pitfalls? I've got Steve O'Brien on the show today, and he's joining the speaker agenda conversation, and we're going to answer all those questions starting right now. Welcome to Speaker Agenda Video and Podcast Show, the only video podcast that interviews thought leaders from the talent acquisition industry and gives them a platform beyond the conference podium. We love discussions that focus on technologies, processes, and solutions that significantly impact hiring outcomes and improve candidate experiences. We're actively seeking new speakers, so if you've got a topic in mind, please follow the link below and find out more about how you can be on a future broadcast of the Speaker Agenda Show. I know there's lots of different companies out there that have dabbled in employer branding videos here and there, and maybe even posted a few video job ads on LinkedIn. So I'm excited because this is our first episode, and it's a great conversation with a colleague of mine for nearly 10 years. I know Steve has been one of the smartest people I've ever met, and I don't need to put any caveats on that. Believe me, when you're going to want to break out a pen and paper and take some notes, I know that anytime I talk to Steve, I'm usually furiously scribbling down every different word and phrase that comes out of his mouth so I can discuss it later. So Steve, thanks for joining the show, and how would you describe yourself?
A leader in the recruiting industry, somebody that's been on the service provider side most of his career, and passionate about talent acquisition.
And we're going to be discussing video and how it impacts the recruiting process. So Steve, why don't you kick it off? What do you think about this?
Oh, video. Well, it's definitely the trend du jour, right? I'll say first, cleanly and simply, video absolutely has a place in the recruiting process. I think people that lean in the direction of my point of view probably see video more as a select intervention or a situation where you're going to change the candidate experience. And we can talk a little bit more about what that means. I know that there are some people out there, you might be one of them. In spite of that, we're still friends, that sees video playing a much bigger role in the everyday advertisement sort of job posting space. I'm open to persuasion, right? But I've got some hesitations, and we can unpack a little bit about how they would play out. But at the end of the day, video allows us to consume rich content and information in ways that text doesn't allow us. Candidates want that exposure to companies that they're considering. They want a way to interact with organizations beyond the bullet points, right? Beyond what we've been doing for the last 30 some odd years. So video is key. How it ends up becoming standard in talent acquisition, I think, is yet to be seen. I vote it'll be more limited, but absolutely present. And some see it as part of every job posting.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily see it as every job post. I mean, let's face it, I'd love to see text-based job descriptions just die, wither away, but I don't really think that's practical. For the vast majority of positions, though, it's just not time effective or cost effective to do a video, right? I think that video has its certain places in the recruiting process, and companies, it's going to be different for every company. But if you look at just the selection of certain jobs, video has a proclivity to really engage candidates, right? But it's not for every job. What kind of jobs do you think that video would be really beneficial for?
Yeah. So maybe if you'll humor me for a second, right? So on that idea that it's probably not going to replace all job descriptions. I'm going to make an analogy, and hopefully I don't lose the point in the analogy. if we thought of job descriptions like recipes, right? Recipes still have their role in cooking, right? There are times when you're just going to want to pop something open. You're not going to want to watch a 10-minute video on how to cook a steak or get the best char on it, or the newest technique on the reverse sear. By the way, if anybody listening is into those kind of videos, check out Google Foods, amazing videos.
I
But
just got a sous vide machine, so I love the damn thing.
yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. But the role that Guga's videos plays in my cooking world is different than the recipe. The recipe still has a place, right? And sometimes it's very transactional, and that's appropriate. And I don't want to spend 10 minutes watching a video on how to perfect my reverse sear. I just don't. I want to know the ingredients and the measurements and the steps. Other times I do want to get content, right? I want to get information about how to perfect a technique, or understand a little bit more about what's going on that a resume doesn't afford, right? And so I probably lean in the direction of thinking that there's going to be a similar distinction in job descriptions. There's going to be times when a job description is appropriate to be a bullet list, and I don't know that that's going to change, to be honest. And then there will be other times where content changes the interaction with the audience, and that changed interaction with the audience changes their behavior, right? Ultimately, that's what we want to do. When we're modifying the way that we communicate to the marketplace, in the simplest form, what we want to do is increase the attention that we're able to garner from the individuals that are checking out our advertisements, right? So to your direct question, I think one of the areas where video is going to be more relevant is in highly recruited populations. So for example, nurses, full stack developers, places where the economy has some imbalance. One of the reasons I believe that that's going to be true is because those individuals are heavily recruited, first off, and there's a lot of repeat advertisement in those skill set areas. If you can differentiate your message against your competitors by adding a peek into the organization that you represent, whether you're a third-party recruiter or a corporate recruiter, or more importantly, if you can give somebody a picture of the hiring manager, their personality, their passions, why they care about the project, the difference that this particular role is going to make in the organization, and what does the organization do, right? Who cares? And I don't mean that condescendingly. I mean it literally. Who cares? What are you doing as an organization? When you're in spaces where the market's imbalanced, I think differentiating your message in that manner is going to be key.
So let me ask, so you can have lots of different objectives for a video, right? Some are used to drive candidate traffic. Some are used to drive candidate engagement. Some are used to click here and apply. So for the really small niche jobs, let's say a nurse, very difficult to find, small candidate pool, what kind of messaging are you going to incorporate in those types of jobs?
Yeah. So first off, I think the messaging needs to be brief. Our attention span is very, very short. We expect a high production value on our content, even if they're casual recruiting videos. And so I think we still need to be quite disciplined with not trying to take too much license with the willingness of the audience to listen and pay attention, right? But messaging, what I think is going to be absolutely critical is showing what the job description can't. And that may be obvious, but specifically showing the who cares. Honest to goodness. And I think if you ask yourself that question when you're making the video, you're probably going to be asking questions that lead you into the right content to produce. On the hiring manager end, what about them is interesting? Why are they at that organization? Did they join recently? Have they been there a long time? What's their experience been? Reveal just a little bit about them as people. That's novel. It is not captured in a job description, and it's interesting, right? There's some basic human interest that goes into tell me about the hiring manager. The second thing is going to be, what difference does this particular job make in the organization, and what difference does the organization make in the world? I don't want to get too academic-y, and I don't have the credentials, even if I wanted to pretend, but, bear with me for a second. Back in 1960s, 1970s, when people stayed at organizations for 10, 20, 30 years, they had pensions. The relationship between the employer and the employee was, let's say, oriented more towards stability and safety, right? 1980s, the U.S. economy shifted in the direction of service sector roles aggressively. I think by the end of the 1980s, 3 out of 4 jobs that were created were in the service sector. 1983, pensions peaked and started to decline, and they, of course, haven't changed that direction. My belief is that what that has done to the relationship between the employer and the employee is it's changed the decision criteria that people use to select where they go, right? And we see that in candidate behavior. We see that in the trends in management strategy and HR strategy. What do we talk about? We talk about communicating the novel values and benefits and the difference that the organization that you represent as a recruiter makes in the world. Candidates aren't going to be able to go to a company because they think they're going to be there for 30 years. And if you do, you're blessed, right? God bless you. But most won't. And so one of the things that candidates are looking for, since they can't just bank on this is where I'm going to retire from, they're looking for another decision criteria. And I think most people are looking for that decision criteria to be, what's the impact I'm making? What's the impact I'm making in this role for the organization? And what's the impact the organization's making in the world? Because that's going to separate company A from company B when the message and the motivation resonates.
You've got, you're talking about culture, you're talking about the who, what, when, where, why, how of the position. You've got the hiring manager on there. You say you wanted to have a short video. This is not a 30-second video if you have all that. And I would be very hesitant to pull a hiring manager out of his busy day to get him on a 30-second or 1-minute video, right? So how long of a video are you talking about? If you have the hiring manager, you're talking about culture, you're talking about the who, what, when, where, why, how of the position, you're going in depth here, but not too in depth. You're really talking, for me, this is like a 10 or 15-minute video. And I don't think you need to do that for every job.
I think you can be briefer than may initially appear. With video, you're looking for impact, not education, in my opinion, right? We're not trying to convey a whole bunch of information. We're trying to convey an emotion. At the job description level and at the video level on a job description, you're still looking for the next call to action be take the next step, right? They're not going to decide to quit their job on the basis of the video. They're not going to decide they want the job on the basis of the video. They're going to decide to take the next step, apply. So when we look at, communicating the hiring manager, why they're there, I'm thinking a couple sentences, right? So I do think that you could get a quick video down in the order of a single minute, right? A 1-minute video. Why is the hiring manager there? What motivates them? What difference is this role going to make in the organization? And boom, let it fly.
Right, so that's where you and I completely disagree. I'm not going to pull a hiring manager onto a 1-minute video. It's just not, I can't convey enough information. That to me is not really a video job ad. That's more like a commercial. A commercial is meant to drive traffic, and there's certainly a place for that in the recruiting process. You throw it up on LinkedIn inside the news feed, and whoever sees it, they click on the link, they go to the apply page. But if you're really trying to gather the attention of passive candidates, I think you need to sell and tell your story a little bit. And I think, I just know by experience that's going to be more than 1 minute. That's probably going to be a 3 to 5 minute video. It can still be very engaging. You're providing them lots of content, lots of information, but I think it's going to be more than a minute. It's probably going to be 3 to 5 minimum.
Well, I mean, people are allowed to be wrong. Yeah, no, I
yes,
hear
you are, Steve.
oh, you thought I meant me. Yeah. So I hear you on the passive candidate. I have some skepticism about whether or not a video job ad is going to motivate a passive candidate. I think we're trying to capture sort of the onlooker, so to speak, the casual browser. And one of the questions, and I think it's a question of fact, right? And if I'm wrong, it won't break my heart in 3-4 years, right? Because I don't have a vested interest in it being 1 minute versus 10 minutes. But some of my skepticism comes from this. The current interaction with the job board. So Indeed, for example, an Indeed user spends on average 6 minutes on the site, looks at 9 pages during those 6 minutes, and spends an average of 7 seconds per job posting. I have difficulty visualizing them going from that rhythm, even if they were willing in a different context, right? But the context they're in, they're plowing through, they're 7 seconds a job posting, they're consuming very sort of cursory information that is leading to do I want to apply, do I not want to apply? I think there's a limit on how much content you can deliver in that context. And so that's part of what influences my leaning in the direction of, I think it's a minute. I think 1, context matters, and 2, it does depend on your target audience. I think I'm trying to capture the casual passerby, and it sounds like you're trying to convert somebody that, maybe doesn't have an updated resume currently.
It can be done. There's no reason why you can't do both, right? So you could record, if you have the hiring manager, you could record the 30-second, 1-minute version, right? That shouldn't take more than a few minutes. especially if you've got a script and a teleprompter. But then if you've got their attention and you have their time, why not record a 3 to 5 minute version also? And why not record another 10 or 15 minute video? Or just record the 15-minute video and slice and dice it. It's a little bit more editing issue, but
Yeah.
it can certainly be done, right? And this way you've got content for the job page, you've got content for social media, you've got long form, short form content, you've got a little bit of everything. You can also take little snippets out of there and position that hiring manager as a subject matter expert. The whole point is, if you've got the video content, then you have options on how you can use it. If you only record a 30-second to 1 minute video, then that's not a whole lot of content, right? You're limiting your options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you. One of my curiosities. So I think, look, I'll concede that if you can get a hiring manager that's presentable, that is articulate and willing to give you that much time,
There's a lot of
I
caveats there.
yeah, well, look, this is an advertisement. This is not a college course, right?
Absolutely.
I had a lot of college professors that maybe shouldn't have gone on camera for Tide to move the next consumer product, but they were phenomenal educators. I don't think we're educating with the videos. I think we're motivating with these videos. But if you can get somebody on and capture 15 minutes of solid content, look, do it, right? But my background, as you know, is sort of trench warfare, so to speak, as a recruiter, right? I've led large teams of recruiters. I've spent a lot of time trying to get hiring managers to participate in the recruiting process, to help them understand their role in selection and motivation of the market. And it's not entirely straightforward. And so I think that also probably influences my leaning in the direction of, let's make it as simple as possible. Let's make the message as clean as possible, and get a short form peek out to the marketplace of what it's like to work in the company. But the beauty of this, Jeff, is we're both going to still be working when we find out which it is, right?
Yeah.
I may have been in the industry for 18 years, but I haven't done well enough to leave the industry yet.
Right.
And I think we're going to find out how does it actually become memorialized into our processes. And the thing that's absolutely sure, video will be a part of it, right? That's not the
absolutely
debate.
In some way, shape, or form. I think a lot of companies are still trying to figure this out. They're doing employer branding videos. They're starting to mix into the video job ad stuff. So the other day, I'm going to pivot here a little bit. When we were kind of discussing doing this recording, you had said a phrase that how you would use video is tell me a little bit about me, and then what was the rest of it?
Yeah. So, I think video is a great application of this. I'm a fan of this technique in general when we're looking at trying to get greater traction on roles where there are headwinds, right? So you could have headwinds because the market is imbalanced. You could have headwinds because the way that you've titled a job doesn't match your competitor's job titling. You could have headwinds because you're an awesome company, but you don't have a consumer level brand, right? Any of those things are going to affect your apply rate. In that context, I'm a huge fan of changing the value proposition and changing the conversation with the marketplace. So the typical candidate experience is you tell me, Mr. Candidate, about you. And if I'm interested, I'll reach out and you'll get to talk to somebody. You'll get to learn a little bit more. Until you tell me about you.
Post a job on a job board, pray the right candidate finds you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Here's 10 bullet points that really don't mean anything, that we haven't updated in 10 years, right? So you look at my job title, my company, my location, and these 10 bullet points that nobody really reads. And if I like your resume, I will descend, and I'm being a little stinky. Recruiters are busy as stink, right? So they're not actually being prima donnas, but the way that it could feel to a candidate is, if my resume is good enough, then the recruiter descends from their throne and, spends some time talking to me as a person. When you use video to change that equation, right? And instead of saying to the candidate, you tell me about you and I'll let you know if I'm interested, you can move first as the company and say to the candidate, before you send me your resume, before you tell me about you, I want to tell you about me, right? I want to tell you about my company, why this role is important, the difference that we make as an organization. If for no other reason than that experience is novel for candidates, that's not usually what they get. my experience has been that you get a radically improved conversion rate of onlookers to individuals reaching out and saying, hey, I'd like to talk to you. And so I think that might have been what we were talking about, is just flip the script, right? Turn it around, tell the market more about the company instead of asking the market to tell the company more about themselves.
Right. So it's kind of the law of reciprocity, right? If you don't
100%.
give the candidate enough information to make a viable decision on whether or not they should even apply to your job, how are they going to join your company, right? So in most text-based job descriptions, there's not enough meat on those bones to make that decision for most candidates, especially a passive candidate. But with video, it allows you to sell and tell your story, a lot more meat on the bones. You're not going to get every candidate, but you're probably going to get I would say a 30 to 40% higher conversion rate on candidates because you are leading by reciprocity. You're giving
Yeah.
them a lot more information, and you're pulling back the curtains as to what goes on in the culture, what goes on in the organization. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. I would want to underscore that for the listeners, right? So Jeff points out the law of reciprocity. It is one of the most persuasive things that we can do as people when we're interacting with each other. If you give, people are more likely to give in return. That additional content is so novel and it leverages reciprocity. It makes a huge difference. And Jeff, you and I used to do something that preceded sort of embedded video on job postings, and it really illustrated what we're talking about: changing the candidate experience, offering to give before asking, really improves the engagement with the marketplace. I like to call them virtual career fairs. I think you call them career webinars. At the end of the day, what we were doing was we were putting a hiring manager on a WebEx and inviting people in advance of applying to come and hear, 5, 10, 15 minutes from a hiring manager. My mind is blown at how effective those strategies are. They're simple. They don't have to be super aesthetically pleasing, but because you're offering something novel, leveraging reciprocity, and saying to the candidate, before you go and fill out my 10-minute application, let me tell you about me. The engagement with the market is, what'd you say, 30% greater? I might even estimate more than that. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm lowballing it, right? Anytime I give a percentage, I tend to lowball it. I've had videos like that, video career webinars, get 70, 80, 92% response rates, conversion rates from those that attended versus those that applied, right?
Yeah.
92% is not the average. So I would say that 30, maybe 40% is probably much more.
So here's the other thing that we can layer in here. And it relates to video, but I don't know how cleanly it relates to the job description. When we're looking at using video in a webinar format, right? Whether you call it a career webinar or a virtual career fair, if you lower the barrier to entry for expressing interest, right? So instead of the barrier to entry being have an updated resume, spend your time creating an account on my ATS, fill out my application, and send in your application, right? It's not a huge hurdle, but it's 10 to 15 minutes. And if you're applying to 10 to 15 jobs, it's time consuming. If you lower the barrier of entry when you're using video, especially in tough markets where you're trying to get deeper engagement with the marketplace, right? I'm specifically talking about when you don't have enough applicants to fill the role with the right person. Moving away from an apply and into an interest expression, it's another huge accelerator that you can deploy when trying to figure out how am I going to get more activity and more engagement in these tough to fill roles. Makes a huge difference. Now, it of course puts the burden on the recruiter,
capture, right?
But yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, don't put them through the entire apply sequence right then and there. Let them watch the video, get interest, pique their interest, strike when the iron's hot, capture their first name, last name, email address, and a phone number, then move on to an apply sequence once they're a little bit hotter.
Yep. Yeah. Makes a huge difference. And if we think about it, right, that's what agencies do in a sense. Maybe I'm being a little bit too quick with my words here, but when you work with an agency, you don't apply, right? You get interested, you get warmed up, right? You have an interview with the agency recruiter. You're probably submitted to the client. All that happens before you actually have to sit down and fill out an application. It feels good, right? Yeah. It's nice. And this is a little way that, a corporate recruiter can give some of that positive candidate experience and some of that preferential treatment, right, that we get when we work with an agency, even from the confines of the corporate recruiter's desk.
And I think that since companies and most recruiters don't have experience on, recruitment marketing automation, putting out lead capture pages, and then obviously using video, I
Hmm.
think there's going to be a little bit of a struggle in the beginning. But I think companies and recruiters can get there, right? Maybe not even recruiters, maybe digital marketing teams. And that's what
Yeah.
we did inside the RPO is we had dedicated people that were digital recruiters, digital marketing people. They would set up email campaigns and landing pages and fun stuff like that. They're not actual, they may have been actual recruiters, but they're more digital marketing people.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that's important to do for the industry and for recruiters is something that you're doing, and it's demystifying the use of video, and taking the perfection out of it as the standard before you start. Right. I don't know who said it. It's a quote we all know that perfect is the enemy of good.
Yeah.
Right. When we're looking at using new techniques and strategies, uh, the temptation to require a standard of refinement before you're willing to move forward is real, right? I mean, I get it. I'm not a perfectionist necessarily, but even when I'm doing something new, you can stare at something over and over and over again and convince yourself it's not good enough to move forward. And some of what you're doing, which is just demystifying, getting in front of the camera, it doesn't have to be perfect, and showing that the actual mode of communication, right? Not the perfection of the message, but getting that novel content out there is 80% of the battle, right? Just
Yeah.
turn the camera on. Don't be sloppy. Nobody's gonna be sloppy anyway, right? But turn
Right.
the camera on and get some content out there, and it's gonna stand out from those recipes, right?
Right.
Just those 10 bullet point lists.
I've definitely found it's more important to execute than execute perfectly.
Yeah,
You just need to get a video out. It doesn't have to be perfect lighting. It doesn't have to be perfect audio. It would really help if you had really good messaging. I hate when people just regurgitate whatever's in the text-based job description. The whole point of video is to give you information above and beyond what's in the text-based job description. So just
yeah.
regurgitating what's in that text-based job description doesn't do the candidate or the hiring manager any good, right?
It,
It's
you
about
know,
additional value.
a rule of thumb that might be something that we can import from other areas in our business careers is when we give presentations on PowerPoints, right? So if you're giving a presentation and you've got a PowerPoint slide, don't say what's on the slide.
Yeah.
We know this, right? I mean, that's like presentation 101. If you've got content on the slide, add color, direction, impact, meaning, add something to what somebody can obviously read on the slide. Uh, I don't think you need to be recruiting much more than 5 years to have come across that coaching if you've got a good boss or somebody helping you improve on your presentation skills. Same principle applies to creating a video if you're going to throw it on a video job description. Don't say the same content that's in the bullet points, right? Add color, add dynamics, add something intriguing that complements and not reiterates what's in those bullet points.
All right. So we're almost out of time. We have a limit on this. So got one last question for you. There's recorded video, and then Facebook and YouTube and now LinkedIn have got live casting, right? So it's a live. Um, what kind of role do you think live casting is going to play as opposed to a recorded video?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And I'm thinking about it. I don't know that I have any thoughts that yet I believe are like, yeah, I'm really convicted that this is likely. But here's one of the things that's on my mind. I'll say first, I love the idea of like live sourcing. I think it's a really cool idea. I think that we'll probably figure out how to do it. Here's the one thing that we've got to navigate though. The apply and the interest expression experience for most people is still confidential, right? And so we've got to figure out how do we create dynamics and interactions in that live format that preserves the confidentiality of the audience. If we can offer that interaction and at the same time offer confidentiality, I think we'll solve a major challenge with the live video in recruiting.
And that's why I like live webinars. They're a little bit more private, and
Mm-hmm.
the people that are the attendee list is not readily visible to every attendee.
Yeah, I
Where
agree.
if you go on a social media site like YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, your name is there, right?
Yep.
And your boss's name might be there. One of your colleagues' names might be there. So
Yeah.
the cat's out of the bag at that point in time.
Yeah. There's some applications that we can imagine where that wouldn't be an issue, like university recruiting, right? And I think university recruiting is probably from a demographic perspective going to lean towards audiences that like that interaction anyway, right? But when you're leaving college, you don't need to be confidential necessarily.
Right.
And I'd love to see university recruiting strategies start playing around with this idea of breaking down the fourth wall, so to speak, and allowing the audience to interact with the actors. So you can really enrich that pre-applicant experience. But like you said, for the professional level hires where confidentiality does matter, listeners, if you're not using career webinars or you're not using some of these videos on conference calls, I'd highly recommend you give it a shot. I think you'll be surprised by the results, and doing it that way preserves the confidentiality of the audience, which, as far as I can tell, is still a key thing when you're using video if it's live.
All right, I think we're going to end it there, man.
Cool.
Thanks so much for joining me on Speaker Agenda, Steve. I sincerely appreciate it. This was our first episode that we've recorded, and we'll get this out there as soon as possible, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, my pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
All right, you're the best, man. Bye,
Take care.
everybody. I thought we were done with Steve, but apparently not, because he and I went on to speak for another 20 minutes, and I finally got to ask the question about how a company should get started using video in their recruiting process. Steve's answer is absolutely priceless. You're not going to want to miss it. So I'm including that in the overtime video in a little segment we like to call After Hours. You can click on the link below to get access to that. Thanks again for watching, and remember, we're looking for speakers from the HR technology space. So if you're interested or know someone who might be, click on the guest sign up form below, and I'll be back in touch with you. This is your host, Jeff Weidner. Now we really are done. I'll see you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.